MennoCultureFest 95 here in heaven. The joint art show begins today as a space.
I'm a counter, I'm a feminist, and so I always notice how women are doing these days. And 10 years ago, 2 of the 6 readers in the Missing Mennonite Cabaret were women. And tonight we have 6 for 6 in a beautifully gender-balanced cultural festival of 10 for 10. So that's something learned, that's something gained. Our first reader tonight is Miriam Caves.
The second part is about, because it's an unpublished manuscript, I can have arrows and, inserts, all sorts of things, and it never has to stick. Is about Lucy goes to a party where she thinks, where she's been told that Green is going to show up, so it's a big deal. So she's really excited about going, and she ends up picking up this guy at the party, and he's not Green. I found out that this man's name was Louis Weinstein, and Versnick. I wish that he could have come right out and said, "I want to fuck you," because that is obviously what he did want. He didn't talk to all the people there, his age, other professionals, film people he knew from work, people that knew him, people that wouldn't fuck him. I noticed, in my drunkenness, some of his colleagues give him that goofy smile that says, "Oh, you, get a life, and go for it, Louis." At first I felt sorry for his wife. I just knew he had to have one. And then I felt mean. I thought, well, she could be all those women that stare at me and Alicia in the rain with our Safeway bags and our secondhand clothes and our many children and our inferior strollers and our lack of men and cars. I stopped feeling sorry for her and decided to fuck her husband just for revenge. Then I felt sad, with a really big feeling of wanting a boyfriend. Some guy my age in jeans and runners, all wiry and muscular, with his arm around me, giving other guys the evil eye, carrying a picture of me, and Dill, I guess, in his wallet, and throwing me over his shoulder, throwing me into a bed, and making love to me in a bed, and then sleeping with his muscular arm lying across my stomach and his hair in my face. This was my thought as I got into Weinstein's Ford Aerostar. He chucked the kid's car seat in the back, thinking I was too drunk to notice, I guess. Stupidly, he held my hand as he drove, and then all I could think about was my dad holding my hand on the way to the waffle shop. My dad had big, brown, hairy hands with chewed nails. Weinstein had narrow, white, bony hands that didn't seem much bigger than mine. His nails looked crisp and even. He had tasseled shoes, and the heel of one kind of slipped off his foot when he had it on the gas pedal. He mentioned something about the farmers getting enough rain this summer. The thing was, this guy Weinstein wasn't really that much older than me. It wasn't his age so much as his position, status. That was it. That's what made me feel like a kid next to him. Really, he told me, he was only 24, which made him only 6 years older than me. He told me that he didn't approve of welfare and that he resented his money being taken to compensate for somebody else's mistake. At least, he said, he wished he could have some say in how welfare mothers raise their kids with his money. I had no idea where we were going. He seemed interested in coming to my place. More slumming, I guess. Too cheap to get a room, wife at home, why not? Like the sign said, fuck the rich, then eat them.
Here. Okay, I'm going to read, first of all, from this, not quite a book yet, and it's from an interview that Kathy Martins did with a woman named Sarah Kraker, who was born in 1905, and she lived in the Steinbach area. And she starts off her story by talking about her mother, who was a midwife in that area, and I'm going to read that part of the story. My mother, Aganitha Barkman, was born in 1863 in Urukhanau, South Russia. She grew up as a healthy and an active child, and when she was about 9 or 10 years old, she saw how her brothers were swimming in the Dnieper River there, and she was really interested in this and asked her brother to show her to swim too, And he said, "Okay, Knight, just come into the water and I'll teach you how to swim." And she went in, he took her into the deep, and then he said, "Knight, nu schwamm oder du versippst." Well, of course, she wouldn't drown there. She just struggled out of the deep and learned how to swim. And my mother grew up, and then there happened to be a widower in the village by the name of John R. Rhymer. And, of course, like they always did, they would go and help this widower. He had 4 little girls from 3 to 7 years of age, and they would help him, whatever they could do for him. And girls would have to go and clean up there and do some washing and baking for him, and also my mother. And eventually, Mr. Rhymer, he kind of liked this girl, and eventually he got married to her. Then she had these 4 little girls to take care of, and also there was a lot of work to do outside. She really liked to work outside too, help her husband in whatever way she could. And eventually she had her own family, and when she had 5 children, then the question came up in the whole group of Steinbach that they really needed a midwife very badly. They didn't have doctors around, but they had heard of a lady in Minnesota, a Mrs. Neufeld, who was really called as a doctor with all her home remedies and experience. And then the congregation decided that they would let this Mrs. Neufeld come out to Steinbach, and now was the thing. Would there be a volunteer to learn for this thing as a midwife? And my mother wanted to do that. So my mother and a certain Mrs. Caves from Greenland also came for these lessons, and took lessons around 3 weeks. Many home remedies were written down. Do you have any of these home remedies yet? Do you have copies of them? Yeah, she copied them, and she has copied them in the same book where she afterwards copied all the births that she delivered. How many births were there? Well, she delivered around a good 600 babies that she registered. But afterwards, there were only a few, and mostly her grandchildren. She hadn't registered them. So, and then, as a midwife, she had many experiences there. Sometimes she would go out to the surrounding farms. They would get her. There was no telephone to tell her in advance to get ready, you know. But they came day or night, and when she had a nursing baby just then, she would take that along, because she never knew if she would stay only a few hours or a few days. And she took the baby along, and then she would care for them. She sometimes found that they ran out of food and there was no bread anymore. And she would pitch in and she would bake schnettje. And once she wanted to bake schnettje and didn't find any sheets to put them on, and when she looked through the window, she saw that the boys had tied a string to the sheets and were using it for a sleigh. And things like that. It was sometimes difficult, you know. And if she went to very poor families, sometimes they really didn't have very much nourishing food in the house. And when it was in town, you know, she had the custom. She would always go back the next day to bathe the baby and bring something to eat if it needed to. Chicken noodle soup had been made ready, and she would take some butter so that the sick lady would have something to put on her bread, and these things. She had many experiences. Once when I was, as her youngest child, when I was 9 months old, then her sister gave birth to twins. And her sister, it was her younger sister, and she didn't have big girls at home and wasn't very strong either, so my mother offered to take one of the twins with her and keep it for a while. So she took one of these little babies and brought it home, nursed this baby with me together for a whole year yet. Then she taught this little baby to eat and brought it back to her sister. So she's almost a sister to you, I guess. Yes, we always call ourselves kind of our milk sisters. We were nursing together. Yes, and she is very close to me this day yet. You were mentioning that sometimes a baby arrived and your mother herself had just had a baby. What did she do then? Yes, well, this is just what happened one day. My parents were living about in the middle of town, and having no telephones, there came a man from the other end of town and asked for her help. And then he asked my dad, you know, where's Mrs. Rhymer? And my dad said, well, she's in bed. She just had a baby 3 days ago. Well, but they need help very badly. Well, my dad said, just go in and see about what Mrs. Rhymer will say. And when he came in, he asked her, and she said, sure, I'll try to help you, but I can't walk to the other end of town. If you would get a horse and buggy so that I can drive. And so he quickly did so. In the meantime, she wrapped up her little baby, and she went there and helped the lady with the birth. And after it was finished, he drove her back again, and she was all right, and the other lady too. Did your mother get paid for her services? Oh yeah, she got $2 for her service. And sometimes when there were people that were better off, they would give her more anyway, but usually her fee was $2. And then she also did the work as an undertaker. If somebody died, she was called to come over, and she would bathe the person, and she would help put into the coffin and things like that. Overall, she was quite a busy lady. But she enjoyed that things were going ahead, you know, and eventually we drove around with a car instead of an ox cart, yes. Yeah. And when she would go along with us to Winnipeg and we would drive over the Red River so nicely on the bridge, she would well, there used to be a ferry. She would never fail to mention that her dad had drowned in that Red River. Yeah, and she liked to go along with us, and one day we went out cherry picking. We happened to be close to St. Anne's, and there was the sand pit close by, and I had some of my children along, and my oldest son, Menno, he had heard so much talk about this sand pit by his uncles that they went bathing there, and he thought this was great. Now he wanted to bathe in the sand pit too. And well, of course, we didn't have time. We were picking cherries, I said, but eventually Grandma said, well, Menno, come on, let's go swimming. And I thought, what's that? I never heard Mom could swim. She never did so anyway. And she went to the car and took off some of her things so that she just had her big slip on, a long one, up to the ankles. And she went into the water with Menno. He enjoyed it just tremendously with his grandma out there, and he still remembers how her big skirt would just blow up kind of a balloon, you know? And she would swim there and taught him how to swim. That was really something for a grandchild.
called Sunday Morning. A pacifist and principled people, Mennonites will not fight in wars, but use wooden spoons to discipline their own flesh, brass-buckled rawhide belts, or worse, the silent treatment. Mom and Dad never kissed. There were no hugs or bedtime stories. God's love was all we needed. We should not want for more. Now I only see Sunday morning, cold hands grabbing skinny ankles under warm sheets, the uninviting smell of Oma's fridge, dodging the wrinkled, colorless lips of aging aunts. I was holding out for an uncle. Thick thighs, that scent that won't wash away. I remained untouched, abandoned every seventh day into evil's hand, a large-assed, purple-veined woman who gave us shiny nickels if only we behaved. Once, Big Ass allowed her young pack to transgress. We sat in the balcony, overlooking the church below. We dove for the furthest seat of the straight-backed bench. She crept up the creaky staircase, bony knuckles pinched 412-covered skin. I floated above the thin harmonies of the hymnal-clutching worshippers below, squinted through dusty panes, waiting for my savior. It was clear from the beginning I would worship men.
Hi, I'm the Mennonite Madonna. Yes, you see, this is about all I can manage putting this bustier on top of my turtleneck sweater. Now you may notice that it's black, so it's perfect. I went into rag pickers and I said, I need a Lana Bustier. So this is what they gave me, and they said this little red flower was particularly effective. I agree. Now, the thing that is wonderful about this is that it has lots of hooks and eyes in the back. There must be about 40 in there. And I'll tell you, this is very tight, and that's why I'm so out of breath, and I have a cold too. But I was saying to Janine, who just helped me put this on, you know, if I've had a stomachache, and if I puke tonight, I can just say I'm the Antichrist. So you see, there are these hooks and eyes, and it's particularly good because, you know, a lot of conservative Mennonites, they don't think you should wear buttons and zippers. So I'm particularly effective there too. Especially since I'm going to be talking about some of my old colony Mennonite relatives tonight. But first of all, I'd just like to say that, you know, this is like my second time doing this performance poetry thing. And I got this idea when I saw Lillian Allen, who is a Jamaican dub poet who now lives in Toronto. I heard her and I thought, wow, you know, I wish I could do something like that, but what to do? So I went up to Lillian afterwards and I said, Lillian, how can Mennonites get rhythm? She said, well, you must have something that you can use. Just do it, girl, do it. Just do anything. So what you're seeing tonight is just anything. This poem at 4 is kind of when I first encountered the cross here. At 4. They're hurting Jesus and eating his body, and cups dribble his blood. I'm horrified. Stand on the pew, see him dying behind me, hung up on the wall, and everyone else forms a ring of ritual around me, and I, 4 years old, mourn for my friend Jesus, who loved the little children, who held them in his lap and accepted bouquets of flowers. My Sunday school leaflets shone with Jesus. He was my friend, and they killed him, and no one told me until now.
The Prime Minister's Dark Day for Canada speech. Fellow Canadians, it is a dark day for Canada. We began by committing ourselves to the truth of our two nations warring in the bosom of a single state. We found the truth and spoke the truth, and now our desire to live the truth has been thwarted by those with a vested interest in error, those with no literature and no history. I shall not mingle conjectures with uncertainties. The dice of God are always loaded. We cannot escape history. A house divided against itself cannot stand. A great Canadian poet once said, "Something there is that doesn't love a wall." Good fences make good neighbors, a gift to last. But I am done with apple picking now. Excuse me. I prefer the dollar sign, the symbol of free trade, therefore of a free mind. Fellow Canadians, we stand today on the edge of a new frontier. Therefore I say to you, ask not what your Constitution can do for you. Ask what you can do for your Constitution. Consider the option. A government big enough to give you everything you want is a government big enough to take from you everything you have. It is the absolute right of the state to supervise the formation of public opinion. Public opinion wins wars. Why should we subsidize intellectual curiosity? Madam, I cannot conceive. But in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. After 3 days, men grow weary of a wench, a guest, and rainy weather. I deny categorically that there is a deliberate conspiracy by force, by fraud, or by both to force Canada into the American Union. The stupid speak of the past, the wise of the present, fools of the future. I offer neither pay nor quarters nor provisions. I offer hunger, thirst, forced marches, battles, and death. I offer the end run, government by football players. Let those who love Canada in their hearts and not with their lips only follow me. It's not the size of your caucus, it's how you use it. By strengthening the strong, we can help the weak. Man is an animal that makes bargains. No other animal does this. One dog does not change a bone with another. I make deals, therefore I am. And I say to the provinces, you may have all that the hen lays, except for the eggs. And I say to the Aboriginal people, you may have all the freedom and self-government of a dog at the bottom of a well. When the rooster crows on the manure pile, the weather will change or stay as it is. In this world, we have people, turtles, and three-sided iron files. I say patience and good eating carry a man far. Patience and men will work, and women will weep. When everything is eaten from the table, we'll have good weather. A tree is never too old to bend. It will cost, yes, but it will taste too. If you buy what you don't need, you will soon need what you can't buy. And this country could not survive with a policy of unfettered free trade. But that was so long ago, it is hardly true anymore. I'm not denying anything I didn't say. These hands are clean. And I say to you with absolute sincerity, whether I will or not, I must constitute this country. Either it comes with me or it breaks. For our country, wrong is right. When men are well governed, they neither seek nor desire any other liberty. The bullet is stronger than the ballet. Get rid of the devil and the priest will have nothing to do. If I could save this country without agreeing to an equal Senate, I would do it. If I could save it by agreeing to an unequal Senate, I would do that. What I do about the Constitution, I do because I believe it helps to save Canada. And what I forbear because the world envies us. Therefore, we must destroy what we have. All things come to an end, except a sausage, which comes to two ends. Join me on this day in singing our great national anthem. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the true north, strong and free. Oh, say, can't you see?
How many of you were here back in 1985 for, well, not here actually, but at the Missing Mennonite Cabaret and Act 2 restaurant? That's a pretty good sampling, actually. It was a good time. It was 10 years ago, actually, and this in some ways is a bit of an anniversary from that time. Was anyone in church this morning? Anyone in church this morning? One of my books.
Oh, my name is Willie Rhymer, and I tell you where I've been. About the time I went to church over in Springsteen. Oh, the man at the door, he shook my hand. He smiled so nice and wide. He asked my name and invited me inside. Are you related to Ernie Rhymer with MCC in China? My cousin married his brother, and my uncle knows his mother. I grew up in Steinbach, always ate my own sweeper, and his pastor's cousin's brother knows my sister-in-law's stepmother. Well, I went inside and looked around. I found myself a chair. They sang some hymns, and then they asked if any guests were there. So I stood up, I said my name, the voice so loud and clear. And the woman sitting next to me whispered in my ear. Are you related to Millie Kraker? Went to school with her in Winkler. She used to be a rhymer, and she grew up in Regina. Well, her aunt did time in NBS. That's where she met my Uncle S. And her pastor's cousin's brother knows my sister-in-law's stepmother. Well, the service finally ended, and I sidled toward the door. That's where I met the pastor, shaking hands and holding forth. I thanked him for his sermon, and he asked my name again. Willie Rhymer, I did say, and I heard that old refrain. Are you related to a rhymer named Bill, and is he in the ministry still? We sang in a quartet together.
I sang bass.
I sang tenor. Well, his sister married my roommate
Back in 67.
or was it 68? And his pastor's cousin brother knows my sister-in-law's stepmother. I'm not related to Ernie Rhymer. Don't know no Bill Rhymer.
Really?
Don't know no Millie Kraker Rhymer. Heck, I haven't even been to Regina. Well, it might seem beyond your collective past. I don't fit into your Mennonite collective past. My excuse is good, you'll agree. I was adopted by Rhymer, you see. Hey, wasn't there a family in southern Ontario that adopted
Whatever happened to
him?
that young
I
man?
think he became a lawyer and he's doing that. Thank you very much.
So you are asking, well, what about that Heaven Art and Book Cafe? This is rather new, but I will go with Heaven Art and Book Cafe. What did you expect? Climbing the steep and narrow stairs, breathing hard, knees not as firm as you thought? Were you thinking maybe of Jacob white-robed angel on each rung, a glint of sun, a floor of burnished gold. Pastel paintings of a human Jesus hang on one wall, wolves on another. You move at once to the windows of heaven, wanting to throw them wide open, although it's November, snowing. Through frosted glass, the red and brilliant green, neon explosions are blessings you don't want to settle for. Expectantly you raise your eyes, looking for breaks in the ceiling, looking for more. Who would have thought you'd sip tea in heaven or cappuccino at a round table, not with Arthur or the dear departed, but with strangers? A poet reads lines about her long-dead, graceful grandmother, who danced her youth away in a white dress, arms raised like wings of a butterfly, hands holding the filmy fabric up against the light. You scan titles from spines of books, as if with luck you'll find among them spells for clear vision, half the sky, a fine grammar of bones, the perfect word for sand.
I did ask him and he forgot I wanted to be introduced as a father. Because when I was here Friday, there were 6 women writers who were almost without exception introduced as being mothers or single mothers. I'm a father. And it's actually the function of my life which I feel most honored about. There was really a Yodel Liebe Abe. He lived 2 doors down from me. And he yodeled at twilight. And behind their outhouse, I had my first test. Not to be a man, I guess, but they didn't know they were composting. They just threw all their garbage in the heap behind the outhouse. And one day walking past, it was a horrible stench. Walking by, I was dared to eat a fish eye that was hanging there. It's not much different than a marble. The other comment I wanted to make, Ralph referred to the book Either Or. There is a Mennonite translation of that called Neither Nor. The correspondence Victor alluded to, I was thinking of it yesterday. He suggested in a letter that all Mennonite literature probably fell into one of 2 categories. There was the tradition of the pulpit and there was the tradition of the barnyard. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. That bifurcation worked quite neatly into German and Low German. The culture of Beethoven and Goethe, and the culture I grew up with, Wolf Carter and Chuck Wagon Gang. High German, Low German, the differences in the languages. It actually is a very strong dialogue probably going on within Mennonite groups.
Abe and Agnes will be there. Also, Bamman, Barg, Barkman, Bartle, and Bergen. Block and Bolt, Bourne and Boschman. Brandt and Brown, Bickert and Bueller too. Crazy old Corny coming in a red canoe. Then Dalkey and DeFair, Dirks and Dole and Breacher. Here's Dewick and the Dicks, riding in a Buick 6. Come Elias, come Engbrecht, come Ents and Ents too. Now Epp, Esau, Falk, Fast, Fair, Flat, and Franz. It's freezing, I'm froze. Ooh, funky, too funky. Anyone seen Jake? Brandt, Giesbrecht, Gertzen, Getz, Goosen, now we're cooking. Here's Greening and Gunther with Ham and Harder, just keeping out of harm's way. Then Heidebrecht and Heinrichs, Hepner and Hebert, Hildebrand and Hildebrandt, Hubner, Hansberger too. Isbrand Isaac with Jantz and Jansen. Come Kahler and Clausen, Klippenstein and Koop. And coming around the mountain, it's Kron and Kruger. Then Kroker and Kraker, like Schroeder and Schrader, Lowen and Leben, Rosen and Caves. But wait, what of Letkinen, Lepp and Lepke, Nayo Menno Martins. Then Neufeld and Neustader and the Nichols, riding CCMs and eating Vospa pickles. Here's Otto on Ota. Oops. Where's Josh? Now Petkow and Pankrow, Pulse and Penner, Peters, Plett and Potter. Quiet, it's query. Then Ratzloff and Radikop, Regier and Rhymer, come Rempel and Riediger, Sawatsky and Schultz, Schellenberg and Schlichting, Midge Schmidt and Siemens. Hey Sommerfeld, hey Stace, on Suderman too. Here's Typro and Thiessen, with Unger, Unrau, Vogt and Voth, verily, verily. Then it's Wall and Workentine, Weir and Weed, Wheeler and Weeds, winding around, and there in the very back row, taking off his toe rubbers and slipping into the last pew, little Zacharias too. You may be seated.